I know this is a bit of an extreme topic for me to talk about on this channel, but as I thought and meditated on what I should talk about for this Sunday's video, my intuition kept leading me to talk about this subject. And if you have any experience with following your intuition, you probably understand that with intuition, you follow it first, then the answer as to why will reveal itself within a matter of time. So here we are. Why do parents beat their kids? This is not a fun topic to discuss. It's uncomfortable. I get it. But in order to grow as individuals, we must acknowledge and discuss the things that aren't necessarily talked about. We can only grow when we address and resolve the pain points that hold us back. Upon doing some personal and historical research, I found some really interesting information. There are certain households that tend to practice physical discipline and those that typically don't. Overwhelmingly, the households that do tend to be statistically African American and the so-called Hispanic or Latino households, while in a lot of European American households, there is significantly less physical discipline being practiced, but there is still some being done. And I figured out why. You see, most human behavior is learned. We can pick it up from others, we can be taught to do certain things, and practices can be passed down unconsciously through generations without the family members knowing why. And that's what I want to discuss and address, the unconscious why. For starters, parents who beat their children are very likely to have been beaten themselves when they were younger. It's an unconscious behavior that gets passed down without parents necessarily realizing what they're doing. Sometimes they wake up and realize that they are perpetuating a cycle that has been passed down by their own parents. And upon learning that and realizing it, they tend to either minimize their actions or stop it entirely, which is great in my book. But we need to go deeper, right? Where did their parents get this idea from? Where did their parents' get this from, right? We're going deep. I found three main ways as to how this would likely come about as an act of discipline in the household. One is that that's all they know, and that's what works to condition the child to stop doing whatever it is that they are being disciplined for. It's pretty simple. Two, it's to get them to step up their performance to do better in a setting such as school, anything academic, typically speaking. And three, now this is the darkest and biggest contributor that I have found regarding physical discipline in the households that I mentioned earlier. And that reason is it's a learned behavior that was conditioned into the family from the early days of enslavement. Now you see, when indigenous people and Africans were stripped of their culture, language, and identity, they had pretty much nothing besides a foreign language given to them and the flesh that they were born with. They were forced to start again on a clean slate. And in those times, as you may already know, it was common practice to physically punish the enslaved people whenever they did something wrong, and to protect their children from doing anything wrong, as well as to protect the other people from punishment that are part of their group. It was also a practice for enslaved parents to beat their own children to prevent them from getting harsher treatment from the enslavers. And remember, these people were stripped of everything that was of their culture. They had nothing. So this was one of the few things that they knew to do outside of manual labor. Now you may be wondering, how does this affect us today? Well, some of these families never had the opportunity to heal and start fresh from these behaviors. Some of these people have been perpetually locked in a state of poverty for generations. And when you're in poverty, chances are you're in a state of survival. And when you're in a state of survival, you're going to stick to what it is that you know, because, well, you just don't have the time or the bandwidth to learn how to go about something in a different way that may be better. There's just very little room to do so. So, to recap, The reason why parents beat their children is because A, that's all they know how to discipline undesired human behavior. 2, to encourage their children to do better in academics. And 3, because it's a learned behavior conditioned into the family from early enslavement, and there has never been a moment of proper healing. And there's one thing that I want to say. Me personally speaking, I've been fortunate enough to not really have been beaten as a child. Maybe a spank here and there, but nothing crazy. And I'm thankful for that. And I came up pretty good, if you ask me. I don't consider myself spoiled or anything like that. So I personally feel that physical discipline is not the way to go about shaping human behavior. Rather, I feel that understanding psychology and implementing a sort of researched reward type of system of sorts is the way to go about it. But to be honest, that's just my conclusion. I'm not a parent. So at the end of the day, there's really only so much that I can say on the subject outside of my personal research. I hope you liked this talk. Again, I know it's a little bit out there of the norm of what I talk about on this channel, but as I said, my intuition led me to talk about this. So I'm sure there's someone out there that will truly get the most out of this message. And I want to say thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next Sunday. In my native tongue, I say, ha home.